So remember back in the day when we used to draw band names and logos on our Trapper Keepers and our binders, or school tablets? Remember writing Van Halen and Metallica and Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin? These symbols, these logos, were more than just doodles though. They were declarations of our rock identity. And man, I've got some crazy stories for you today as we count down the best ever. These are going to blow your mind. Like the logo of a revolutionary band that's shrouded in mystery, nobody can figure out who sketched it, whether it was swiped from the sign of a seedy gentleman's club or if it was a jab at frontman Axl Rose. Plus, the same band's logo was so low on the priority list, they paid a measly $15 to a typesetter to create it, instructing her just to use whatever font was already loaded in the machine, and it became legendary, accidentally. Then there's the emblem known as the lick. It was faxed over to the band's label, but this fax was so distorted, they had to redraw it because they couldn't tell what it was. It changed it, but that change was kept a secret for decades. Plus, the most famous rock band ever, with the most iconic logo ever, didn't actually put it on any of their albums until a decade after they broke up. And they didn't even copyright it until 30 years after they formed their band. And they've made more from licensing that logo than their music. Let's do it. Hey, music junkies, I want to try something out on this channel. It's a topic that I've wanted to cover for a long time now, and I figured I'd do it today. Today's episode, we're diving into the story behind the most iconic band logos in rock history, and there's a lot to choose from. But I had to start somewhere, so this time around, I'm going to count down 7 of the greatest logos from the rock era and their stories, and when you see them, instant recognition. But quickly, before I get into this, I do want to give a shout out to Jim K. Davies and Jamie Ellul and their book, Logo Rhythm. It was an invaluable resource for the episode, and I highly recommend buying it. You can get it right up here at the link or the link below. It's a great book. So starting things off at number 7, we're diving into the legendary Queen crest. This masterpiece of icon artistry screams rock royalty, right? This one is filled with all kinds of symbolism though, so stick with me here, this is crazy. Queen's iconic crest was conceived by none other than Freddie Mercury himself, the flamboyant frontman who wasn't just a powerhouse vocalist, but a talented illustrator as well. He actually studied art and graphic design at Ealing Art College in West London back in the late 60s, honing skills that would later define the band's visual identity. Now, Freddie poured his heart and soul into this design, layering it with personal touches and profound meanings. It's not just a logo, it's a visual manifesto of the band's essence. So check this out. At its core, the Queen crest ingeniously weaves together the zodiac signs of all 4 members, creating a harmonious emblem of unity amid their diverse personalities. Flanking the center are 2 majestic lions representing bassist John Deacon and drummer Roger Taylor. Of course, both born under the fiery sign of Leo. Symbols of strength, courage, and that raw rock energy. I'm also a Leo. And then there's the detailed crab embodying guitarist Brian May's Cancer zodiac, evoking intuition, protection, and emotional depth. And for Freddie Mercury, a proud Virgo, he chose 2 ethereal fairies, delicate yet supportive figures that add a touch of whimsy. These elements all surround a bold, stylized letter Q at the heart with an intricate crown set inside its bowl, reminding fans of the band's self-proclaimed regal status. But the whole composition is dramatically overseen by a massive phoenix rising from swirling flames below, its wings spread wide in a blaze of rebirth. Of course, the phoenix, that mythical bird from ancient lore, famously perishes in a fiery inferno only to emerge anew from its own ashes, that stands as a potent symbol of immortality, resurrection, and eternal life.
Fascinating creatures, phoenixes.
Freddie designed this in 1973, right around the time Queen was forming and before they'd even dropped their self-titled debut album. It was a gutsy, almost cocky declaration. Our music will live forever. And he was right.
Up to the skies and see.
Decades later, after Freddie's tragic death from age-related complications in '91, the band experienced resurgences, especially through the repeated re-emergence of their smash hit Bohemian Rhapsody. It's like Freddie foresaw the band's enduring legacy and embedded it into their symbol, into their logo. But hidden in this logo was a secret from Freddie Mercury. Digging deeper, Freddie, ever the provocateur, slightly infused the crest with his own identity in a way that was, different for that era. As a Virgo, he opted for the sign's traditional emblem. Two fairies or maidens often depicted as graceful winged beings. But in the early 1970s UK, fairy carried a loaded double meaning. It was a derogatory slang for his sexuality. But by positioning these two fairies at the base, literally upholding the crest beneath the mighty lions, Freddie was injecting a self-referential nod to his own sexuality and larger-than-life persona. But since it was all cloaked in the veil of astrology and mythology, it slipped past everybody while winking at those in the know. But it was a secret that was kept within that. The crest journey started humbly, as a stark black and white line drawing on the back cover of Queen's 1973 debut album. It was simple, but it was striking. But over the years, it evolved into more vibrant, detailed iterations. Colorful renditions on albums like A Night at the Opera in '75, with richer shading and metallic flourishes that popped on vinyl sleeves and merchandise. Today, it's emblazoned on everything from t-shirts to tour posters, securing its place as one of the most iconic logos in rock history. A testament to Freddie Mercury's visionary genius. So in at number 6, we've got one of those straight up baffling logos, icons, symbols, whatever you want to call it in music history. And it belongs to the artist that was formerly called the artist, formerly known as Prince. That's right, I'm talking about Prince's so-called love symbol. Now, there's some interesting stories here that you probably haven't heard. A lot of people know about this, but not about these. The glyph was more than just a logo. It was a full-blown statement of rebellion, creativity, and a wild chapter in pop culture. So let's rewind back to the beginning. Prince Rogers Nelson burst onto the scene as a teenage prodigy, signing his first deal with Warner Brothers Records back in 1977 when he was only 18 years of age. He was just a kid when he got going. Under Warner's wing, though, he crafted some of the most groundbreaking albums in music. 1999, the revolutionary Purple Rain in 1984, which of course wasn't just an album, it was a cultural phenomenon with its accompanying film.
Purple Rain.
And then there was Sign of the Times in 1987, the double album packed with social commentary, funk, and soul that continued to prove that he was a musical chameleon and a straight musical genius. Warner Brothers was there through it all, though, helping catapult him to superstardom. But as the years roll on, the relationship soured big time. By the early 1990s, Prince inked a massive new contract reportedly worth $100 million. One of the biggest in the industry at the time. But it came with some serious baggage. And here's where the friction caught fire. Prince, as we all know, was insanely prolific. I mean, he had a vault in his Paisley Park studio crammed with hundreds of unreleased tracks still. Songs poured out of him like an endless stream. Some say it's in the thousands. He was always giving songs away to other artists as well. With so much music coming out of him, he wanted to be able to drop albums on his own schedule. However, Warner Brothers was worried about oversaturation. They thought too much Prince too fast might dilute sales and leave fans bored. So they enforced a strict release schedule for the Purple One, holding back his output to maximize their profits. Now this, of course, pissed Prince off to no end. He was angry, livid. He likened the situation to modern-day slavery, a bold and controversial stance that highlighted the exploitive side of record deals that are still there. In protest, he started appearing in public with the word slave scrawled across his cheek, in bold marker during performances and interviews. As Prince put in a pointed statement, Warner Brothers took the name, they trademarked it, and used it as the main marketing tool to promote all the music that I wrote. The company owns the name Prince and all related music marketed under Prince. I just became a pawn used to produce more money for Warner Brothers. And you know what? He wasn't wrong. And again, he did willingly sign the contract. A lot of bad contracts signed out there. But to take back his identity, he stopped using his name and instead adopted the love symbol. But the love symbol's roots go way deeper than the contract drama. A lot of people don't know this part. It evolved from an intriguing blend of the male and female biological symbols overlaid to represent unity, love, and maybe Prince's own androgynous flair. And this is what a lot of people don't know. It first popped up in 1982 on the cover of his album 1999, hinting at his futuristic boundary-pushing vibe. By 1984, it made a cameo in the Purple Rain movie emblazoned on the custom purple motorcycle he rode through the streets of Minneapolis, becoming a subtle signature in his visual world.
How can we spend the night in dimension?
The symbol then leveled up in 1992 when Prince enlisted local Minneapolis designers Mitch Hansen and Liz Luce to polish it up. They transformed the basic glyph by adding a stylized horn element slashing across it. And this refined version wasn't just art. It was actually Prince's escape hatch. On June 7, 1993, his 35th birthday, Prince dropped the bomb. He was ditching his birth name and adopting this unpronounceable symbol as his official moniker. The media went nuts. How do you even say this? Journalists dubbed him the artist formerly known as Prince, or TAFKAP for short. All fans just called him the artist. Now, to help with the transition, Prince's team shipped out floppy disks to major newspapers, magazines, and TV outlets, and each contained a custom font file of the symbol so that folks could type it into articles without any hassle. A lot of people don't know that one. This symbolic era lasted 7 turbulent years, during which Prince released albums like The Gold Experience under his new name. When the clock struck midnight on January 1st, 2000, his Warner Brothers contract, it expired, and Prince reclaimed his original name. It marked the end of an audacious protest and the start of a whole new chapter. Coming in at the number 5 position on our countdown of epic music logos, it's the band with the raciest W of the rock era. I'm talking about Average White Band.
Cause I got work to do.
The Average White Band has a famously provocative logo that's, let's say, downright cheeky. I'm sorry, I had to go there. Bad joke. Because of this particular platform, though, I'm going to have to blur part of it. In the early 70s, the band's full name, Average White Band, was long, and it kind of undermined the seriousness of their authentic funk and soul sound. So when the band's fame started escalating after they signed with Atlantic Records, they made the decisive move to shorten their moniker to the sleek AWB. The creation of the famous logo was key to the rebranding effort. The famously suggestive part of the AWB logo, the stylized W that resembles, a woman's, was not the idea of a hired artist, but was conceived by the band's co-founder, bassist, keyboardist, and singer Alan Gorey. He wanted to infuse some extra sex appeal into the band. The logo, it was actually first drawn by Gorey on a napkin. And predictably, Atlantic Records, though they liked it, they felt it was too racy for retail stores. They thought it would ultimately hurt sales. But somehow the band managed to talk him into it. Afterwards, artist Tim Bruckner was hired to sketch out a professional version of the logo by placing their distinctive, suggestive AWB logo front and center on their iconic white album cover. The band dramatically stamped their own unique, if not kind of raunchy identity onto it. This design decision ensured that the cover became synonymous with the band's playful and confident aesthetic. It's one of the most memorable logos of the 70s for sure, and like their label predicted, the suggestive nature of the album cover did become a problem. In fact, it was considered so explicit in their home turf, the UK, that it caused an immediate controversy and led to censorship. But on the other hand, since the cover was deemed inappropriate for minors, it turned the album into a semi-underground hit, giving the band an instant reputation as rebellious bad boys of funk. All right, coming in at number 4, I got a 2-for-1 here. Nirvana's iconic emblem, or should I say emblems, and a really interesting story here. It's actually 2 worth dissecting, and they both have crazy stories that capture the band's do-it-yourself ethos. First up is the familiar Nirvana logo type, that slanted bold script that's become synonymous with 90s angst. This one traces back to the band's early days on the indie label Sub Pop. So designer Lisa Orth, who was handling artwork for their 1989 debut album Bleach, apparently didn't see the fledgling group as a top priority at all. Nirvana was still scraping by in the Seattle underground scene after all, so she just kept it on the cheap. She shelled out a measly $15 to a typesetter, instructing him to just use whatever font was already loaded in the linotype machine. Boom. That turned out to be Onyx, a chunky sans serif typeface. It's got that vintage vibe evoking old school posters and headlines, which accidentally nailed the band's simplistic, anti-glamour attitude. It was all an accident. But let's get into the good stuff. The unofficial Nirvana logo that's outlasted trends and tragedies, the infamous smiley face with X'd out eyes, a wobbly grin, and the tongue lolling out. This doodle, it's been slapped on everything from t-shirts to tattoos, becoming the universal badge of rebellion, and one that many young females wear and the shirt that's instigated the Name 3 Songs quiz, that follows. The most widely accepted origin story of this pins it on Kurt Cobain himself. Back in 1991, as Nirvana geared up for the explosive release of Nevermind, of course, the album that would catapult them from garage gigs to global stardom, Kurt Cobain reportedly sketched it for a launch party invitation at Seattle's Rebar Club. It was quick. It was just a punky flyer. Nevermind Nirvana celebrates the release of their new Geffen Records album with a show at the Rebar. Smiley, with its dead-eyed stare, captured the album's, spirit, the nihilistic spirit of it. But of course, being Nirvana, nothing's that straightforward. Sensational rumors have swirled for decades, adding layers to the myth. One wild tale claims it's a slight caricature of Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose, of course, Kurt's rival in the Rock Wars, those X-eyes mocking Axl's over-the-top persona. But another more plausible story ties the doodle to Seattle's seedy underbelly. Actually, a strip club called the Lusty Lady. It was a downtown peep show, famous for its cheeky marquee signs. Legend has it that their signage featured a similar dazed smiley next to a slogan that said, "Have an erotic day." And, Kurt Cobain could have spotted it while he was wandering the city streets, flipping a commercial, adult-oriented image into an anti-establishment icon. And that's probably more what happened, taking something sleazy and corporate and twisting it into a symbol for the disenfranchised generation, Gen X. But here's where things get even weirder, escalating from folklore to full-blown courtroom drama. The biggest bombshell isn't the logo's meaning, but the high-stakes legal saga that exposed cracks in Nirvana's own history. So in 2018, Nirvana LLC, the entity managing the band's legacy, sued fashion designer Marc Jacobs for ripping off the smiley in one of his collections, slapping it on jackets and tees. As the lawsuit dragged on, it pulled in surviving members Dave Grohl and Kristen Selvidge for depositions. Now, shockingly, both of them admitted under oath that they could not definitively say that Kurt Cobain created it. Enter Robert Fisher, a former art director at Geffen Records, who stepped up claiming that he designed the logo back in 1991 for Nevermind's marketing materials. He actually produced sketches to back that claim up, turning the case completely upside down. Finally, after years of wrangling, all parties inked a settlement in 2024 without revealing the true creator of it. So the mystery endures, but much like Nirvana's chaotic legacy, their symbols keep stirring up controversy and cash all these years later. All right, in at number 3, we have one of Led Zeppelin's well-known logos. They had a few. There's actually a lot of iconic imagery that we could go into here, like the 4 symbols on Zeppelin 4. We've covered those in other episodes, though, and I want to get into some new material here. So let's talk about the elegant Led Zeppelin wordmark, first found on Houses of the Holy, crafted in 1973 by the visionary duo of Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell, the legendary design firm Hipgnosis. These guys were the wizards behind some of the most mind-bending album covers of the era. We've talked about them. From Pink Floyd to Genesis to Paul McCartney to Bad Company to Zeppelin's own trippy visuals. But here's the twist. This lettering that they designed wasn't even meant to be the band's official logo. It started life as part of their artwork for their 5th studio album, Houses of the Holy, and it just kind of stuck around, evolving into the default emblem that screams Zepp on posters and t-shirts and everything in between. It wasn't meant to be. To understand its magic, we got to dive into the album's cover art, which is a story in and of itself. Houses of the Holy dropped in March of 1973. Of course, an eclectic sonic powerhouse blending hard rock anthems like The Song Remains the Same with funky grooves in Jamaica and epic ballads like The Rain Song, which we've covered all on here. And actually, the logo saved the album from an outright ban. Let me explain. We talked a little bit about this, but to refresh your memory, the cover drew heavy inspiration from Arthur C. Clarke's sci-fi classic Childhood's End, a tale of human evolution and alien overlords where children ascend to a higher plane. Now, Hipgnosis translated that into a surreal collage. Multiple shots of 2 children, siblings Stephen and Samantha Gates, they're age 5 and 7, clambering over the hexagonal basalt columns of Northern Ireland's Giant's Causeway. Aubrey Powell snapped the photos during a grueling 10-day shoot plagued by rain and cold, and then he layered them into a psychedelic vista of orange skies, turquoise waters, and purple hues. It was ethereal, it was otherworldly, it was Zeppelin. But man, it caused a ruckus. The children on the front sparked outrage, the cover did, parents groups flipped, and in the Bible Belt stores flat out refused to stock it. Atlantic Records, Zeppelin's label, slapped a paper OB, the wraparound band printed with the album's title and band name to obscure the kids. I mean, even Peter Grant, Zeppelin's Bulldog manager, grudgingly okayed it to avoid total bans. Now zoom in on the OB lettering. That's where the logo magic happens. The hand-drawn script came from artist Bush Hollyhead, a quick-draw talent who whipped it up fast. Those double crossbars on the H's, those floating O's, underlined with flair. Of course, tiny decorative swirls that nod to Celtic knots and mystical runes. It's all about the organic flow, though, blending geometry with nature. But Hollyhead layered in more. The tall columnar letters mimicked the giants' causeways, basalt pillars. Those eerie honeycomb rocks steeped in Irish folklore of giants and druids. It evokes stone carvings from pagan rituals, tying back to Zepp's obsession with mythology, Tolkien, and the occult. Every letter is unique. The E, the Z, the P, they stretch long and lean, and the N slants downward on the right, jutting out. Repeated letters vary slightly in size and flourish, but Hollyhead's speedy style left a charming unevenness. Over time, the titling got detached from the OB. It got polished up and adopted as Zepp's go-to logo, gracing reissues and merch, and the band loved it. Heading in to the bridesmaid position at number 2, I've got one of the most famous logos in rock history. Some may say it's the most famous. The Rolling Stones' tongue and lips logo, often just called the Lick. And the story behind it is a lot more unexpected for those who might think that it was just modeled after Mick Jagger. Back in April of 1970, John Pash, who I'll refer to as John going forward, was a 24-year-old postgraduate design student at the Royal College of Art in London, honing his skills in graphic design. His bold, innovative work caught the eye of the charismatic Stones frontman Mick Jagger, who was always on the hunt for fresh visuals to match the band's edgy vibe. He was first commissioned by John to create a striking poster for their upcoming European tour. Now, impressed by the results, Mick brought John back when the band was launching their record label, Rolling Stones Records, and they needed a standout logo to represent it, to make it flash. The brief was loose, but inspiring. So Jagger invited John to his glitzy Chelsea home, where they pored over ideas. He shared clippings from books and magazines that captured the cultural zeitgeist, images of pop art and countercultural icons and exotic influences. Now, among them was a vivid depiction of the Hindu goddess Kali, fierce and unapologetic, with her pointed red tongue stuck out in a gesture of defiance and power. This struck a chord with John. It symbolized anti-authority energy that perfectly aligned with the Stones' rebellious spirit. Drawing from this, along with subtle nods to the band's sensual, provocative vibe, he sketched initial concepts. Now, incidentally, John has always debunked the urban legend that it was a direct cartoon of Jagger's famously full lips. Just not true. It was Kali. John went through several different versions, refining the curves and the angles over a few months until he got the now familiar image just right. The band loved the final pick, approving it with a lot of enthusiasm, and they compensated him with a modest £50 for his efforts. Which is peanuts compared to what the logo would be worth in the future. But hey, this was the 70s, and John was just thrilled to be part of the scene, to be working with the Stones. To sweeten the deal, though, he later got a $200 bonus once the logo started gaining traction. Okay, here's where the story gets really, really interesting. So the logo made its debut on the inner sleeve of the American release of the 1971 album Sticky Fingers, a classic record that was already notorious for its Andy Warhol designed zipper cover. Remember, the zipper was scratching other records and the record within, and they had all this to do, and the deadlines were tight. And the final artwork was still in London. So a rough 1-inch low-resolution version was faxed over to the U.S. label president Marshall Chess in a hurry, because they needed to get it done. Now, the fax quality was abysmal. It was all fuzzy and distorted. They couldn't see it. So American art director Craig Braun, he enlisted in-house illustrators to clean it up. They narrowed the tongue for a sharper look, they added glossy white highlights to the lips and teeth, and they deepened the black void in the throat for more dimension. Now, John later acknowledged the tweaks were necessary because, of the poor transmission, but he lamented that his pristine original was not used. Braun, he was fearing backlash. He kept this revision a secret from Chess for 45 years. But as the years rolled on, John's creation exploded in popularity, even though it had been changed. From 76, he started receiving a small share of royalties as the logo adorned everything from t-shirts to tour merch, raking in millions for the band. But in 1982, perhaps underestimating its escalating value, he actually sold his copyright for £26,000. A decent sum at the time, but a move that he would come to regret. This continued to be a key ingredient in the Stones' billion-dollar empire. Who knows how much John would have raked in had he have kept that copyright. But he's reported to have said it would have been many millions of dollars and he could have bought his own castle by now if he'd hung on to the rights. That's rough.
Wild, wild horses. And a big bass drum I ride. Let me know why you got me this way.
All right, we're here. We've made it to the end of the countdown. And at the number one spot, it goes to the first official rock and roll band logo in history. Couldn't be any other band than this one. The Beatles with their famous drop T logo type.
The Beatles, bring them on!
And I'm talking brand identity here for a band. Not even the King Elvis Presley had that before the Beatles came along. The lads from Liverpool didn't know it at the time, but the act of slapping their name on their drum kit would be revolutionary. All right, so for this one, you got to go all the way back to April 1963. Manager Brian Epstein wanted the name of the Fab Four painted on Ringo's bass drum. It wasn't a new practice among bands at the time, but this time it would be different. This time it would change everything. So Ivor Arbiter, owner of Shaftesbury Avenue's Drum City, would be commissioned for this job. Said Ivor, and I quote, "I had a phone call from the shop to say that someone called Brian Epstein was there with a drummer. Ringo Schmingo, whatever his name was. At the time, I certainly hadn't heard of the Beatles. Every band was going to be big in those days, so I didn't really take it seriously." Those are his words. So after meeting up with Brian and Ringo at the shop, Ivor drew up a few rough sketches right there in the store, including the elongated T version we all know so well. And that's the one that got the green light. The design was passed along to local sign painter Eddie Stokes, who painted it onto the drum. Up through 1967, Stokes would continue to hand paint more versions of the drop T logo on Ringo's drum as they wore out as they played. 7 different versions were created, each with their own nuances, but all were variations that were essentially the same basic design. Soon that drop T logo would become instantly recognizable worldwide. Here's the craziest thing, and nobody's going to believe this, but it's true. The now famous logo didn't appear on any of the Beatles albums until over a decade after they broke up. You actually first find it on 1982's 20 Greatest Hits compilation. And then it'd be another 12 years, in 1994, before Apple Records finally trademarked the logo. I mean, can you believe that? One of the most iconic logos in music history wasn't officially trademarked until 1994, years after they broke up. And now for the biggest kicker of the whole countdown. The Beatles have made more money from licensing that logo than all of their music combined. And they didn't actually trademark it until they put out the Beatles anthologies 30 years after they formed. This is crazy. But get this, the Beatles actually had another logo before the famous drop T. In February of 63, a couple months before Eddie Stokes drew the logo on the drum kit, the Beatles actually commissioned signwriter Terry Tex O'Hara to create a black bug logo with 2 antennas coming up from the top of the B for Ringo's drums. It actually originated from a sketch that Paul McCartney had made earlier. But as you can see, it didn't last. The drop T was the one that stuck, and it became the first true band logo in rock and roll history. We talk about the Mandela effect on steroids. The Beatles didn't actually put their logo on any of their albums until the late 80s. That's crazy. Mandela effect for sure. All right, man. So what did you think? Did you enjoy this episode? Should we do a follow-up and do Pink Floyd and some of these other bands, Leonard Skinner? These logo stories, they're just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more. Grateful Dead, Van Halen, Metallica, Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses. List goes on. And let me know in the comment section if you'd like to see a part 2. Share this one if you like it. Like it, comment on it, all that kind of good stuff. And make sure to pick up the book, Logo Rhythm by Jim K. Davies and Jamie Ellul. It is an incredible book, so many great stories, and it's just a fascinating book. You can get it below or at the link right above here. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.